Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Discussion series where we are currently talking about the Zoodiac deck. Today I would like to go over Paulo Goncalves' top 8 list from the LCS recently. I believe this was done last week, maybe not last week, but the weekend prior, and like I said, he got a top 8 finish. Some of you guys might recognize Paulo's name because most recently he got first place at the Sao Paulo Regional in Brazil playing Salamangreat, and he has multiple other tops including a YCS top 8 finish in Guadalajara, a top 8 with Burning Abyss in Rio de Janeiro, and then also another Burning Abyss top in Rio de Janeiro all the way back in 2015. So this guy is generally known as a really good deck builder. He surrounds himself with people that also can deck build very well. So when you're looking at this deck, it'll probably look a little odd at first, but the way that he explains himself, he's very articulate and he kind of explains his card choices very in depth. So looking at this on the surface level, I know it seems kind of clunky, but there's reasons why he plays certain ratios. So let's go ahead and jump right into the profile. We're going to start off with Nibiru as we always do. It's a staple hand trap. He shares the same sentiment as everybody. It's just, a really great board clear, puts a body on board, just generally good to have, especially with the amount of combo decks that are running around in the format. We play one Golden Lord, which I personally don't agree with. He didn't really touch too much on why he played just one aside from how he sides, and I can agree with it in that aspect, but I think right now playing it in multiples, I wouldn't play it at 3, but I would play it at 2. I think it's necessary because if you're playing against Zoo, and if your opponent is, anywhere close to a half-decent Zoo player, they're going to be utilizing Whiptail a lot to banish your Eldlich cards. And when they're doing that, they're getting rid of the Golden Lord, they're getting rid of the Conquistadors and the Haqueros, and so you're losing your ability to kind of recur those resources, and you don't want to run the risk of losing your Golden Lord. So I personally would play 2 copies, but Paulo decided to play 1. He also played 1 Fleur-de-Lis and 1 Maximus, and I thought this was interesting, not necessarily the Fleur-de-Lis, because I think most variants, that are splashing Dogmatika in their decks just play a single copy because it's searchable and you don't really need multiples. You could also add it back from grave from Nadir Servant's effect. But the Maximus, that's the one that really got me. When I was looking through his deck list, I noticed he wasn't playing the Shaddoll Trap, which normally when you're seeing Maximus being splashed into a deck, they're playing the Shaddoll Schism Trap, which basically lets them fusion summon on your opponent's turn, and you also get to pop a card on the field. I really was kind of blindsided by it because I don't really see, like I said, very surface level, I don't see a reason why you would play this without playing that combo. But in his video, he explains that he uses it as kind of like a power play against combo post-siding, because he sides in a ton of hand traps. You can see the side deck from here. He sides in a ton of hand traps, and he wants to be able to stop them with hand traps and also have powerful follow-up plays, that being his Maximus. So not only does Maximus function as a big body on board with 3k defense, but it also lets you send cards like Natis from your extra deck to the graveyard, Titaniclad, Omega, the Adignister monster. It lets you do a lot more than just kind of make that Shaddoll line of play that you see with Invoke decks. He did talk about it a little bit more, but generally that's the reason why he said he was playing that. He also plays a very small Zoo package. I know Ecclesia is here in between these Zoo monsters, but I'll go ahead and just talk about them in general. So he plays 4 main deck Zoos, that's 2 Thoroughblade, 1 Whiptail, and 1 Ram. When he's explaining this, he's technically playing 8, because you're playing 3 10-key and 1 Barrage. So his ratio is still there. He says he never really uses the Zoodiac effects, or prefers not to, at least when he's going first. He just climbs into Dryden immediately. And I think that's a sign of like a decent Zoo player. I mean, I know it's very like basic level, but when you know your deck enough that you don't really need to activate the effects, you don't want to take the risk of losing to a Gamma or to an Ogre. Dryden's just powerful enough to not want to really waste your normal summon in that fashion. So he plays 4 main deck copies, 8 including the Barrage and the 10 keys, and then he also plays 2 Ecclesia to round off the monster Dogmatika package here. Ecclesia is basically the Rhoda of the Dogmatika cards, alongside Nadir Servant. Nadir Servant's the bigger Rhoda, but she searches Punishment, Maximus, and your Fleur-de-Lis. So She also can't be destroyed by battle with a monster summoned from the extra deck. Once again, that's something really important to note because you can kind of stall your opponent if they're not paying attention. Very, very good to keep in mind, especially when you're staring down a very intimidating board and your opponent doesn't have removal, but they have some big monsters on field. You can just hopefully resolve the special summon this in defense, and you can even opt to not activate the effect to lose out to like a Herald or something like that. So keep that in mind when you're playing. And the monster hand traps, we play 3 Ash. He says it's just generically good, and I totally agree with that. And then 3 Veiler. He didn't really touch on why he plays Veiler. I think he was probably just looking for other hand traps to fit in the main that are just generically good, that don't really have like niche circumstances or niche matchups that you would want to play them in. They just have, a general ability to kind of be effective against multiple different decks. Normally, when you see people in this format playing Veiler, they're usually playing like 1 or 2 copies so they can play Selene and go into access codes. So, you would normal summon a tuner, which would be your Ash Blossom or your Veiler, go into Halqifibrax, summon out a Veiler, go into Selene. Selene gets tokens or counters based on how many spells are in the graveyard or on the field, and then you remove those spell counters, and then you summon back the Veiler from grave. That is a Link 3 and a monster that's counted as 1 Link material to go into access code. Access code gets boosted up by 3,000, and then you have your pops. So that's generally why you see this, but as you can tell from his extra deck, he doesn't play it for that purpose. He just plays it for the sole purpose of it being a hand trap. So moving on to the spells, we have 3 Nadir Servant, very standard for any Dogmatika deck. I think you'll be hard-pressed to find any deck playing less than 3. This sends 1 monster card from your extra deck to the graveyard, then you add 1 Dogmatika monster or the Fallen of Albiz monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand that has attack less than or equal to that sent monster in the graveyard. Also, for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. So, very standard, you guys know what this does. Just like I always say, the one thing to note is this can add back from graveyard, so if you're in the grind game, you have no targets in deck, you can still activate this if you have like a copy of Natis or, really anything that you want to send, like the Wind Pegasus add Ignister card. That's pretty good late game. So is Omega to kind of shuffle back your opponent's resources after they're trying to recover. Just something to keep in mind. Now back to the spells, we play 3 Cursed Eldland. This is the pay 8 feel great of a generation. We are now moving away from Cleafort Scout to Cursed Eldland, so we're just paying 8 in a different format. This lets you search any of your Golden Land Spell or Trap cards or your Golden Lord. And when it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can Foolish Burial a Golden Land card or your Golden Lord. Zoodiac Barrage, once again, just an easy access to one of your zoo monsters. Same thing with the Tenki, these are just 3 additional Rhodas in your deck. Then he plays 3 Infinite Impermanence, just a staple hand trap I think in the meta. 3 copies of Scarlet Sanguine for access to your Golden Lord and to also get out your Conquistador and your Haquero past turn 1. 1 Punishment because you only really need 1. This deck is going to be closing out the games pretty fast with as much as it controls. You also have the recurability of your Golden Lord. You have some cards that can get pretty big here, including Fleur-de-Lis, and these can actually get pretty big in tandem with Fleur-de-Lis. So you will be generally closing out games relatively quickly as long as your opponent doesn't just kind of like spiral out of control on their turn. Then we play 3 copies of Conquistador of the Golden Land, and then 2 copies of Haquero. So 3 copies of the pop, that's kind of the most relevant effect in today's meta, and then 2 DD Crow. He also mentions that he plays a certain ratio of Eldlich cards, so this would be these 3, these 2, these, and his Golden Lord, because he takes out all of his Golden Lord package or Eldlich package for hand traps post side. So really he wants to have, I think he said like 23 hand traps in the main, which this is just kind of crazy to me. That is like very, very ballsy. I mean, when more than half of your deck is hand traps, they have to be impactful. It's not like he sides out hand traps when he's gonna go second against combo. He just sides out the whole fucking Eldlich package and puts more hand traps in. So before we talk about that crazy theory, let's go ahead and finish with the deck profile. We will move on to the extra deck. 1 copy of Titaniclad because on the end phase it is a Rhoda or a special summon of any of your Dogmatika monsters. 2 copies of Natis because when you send it to the graveyard it gets to pop a card on the field. Doesn't have to be face up, it's just pop any card on the field. Then we have 1 copy of PSY-Frame Lord Omega, which can be used if you're siding in your Gammas. It can be hard made that way, or you can send it off of Nadir or Punishment to have a name in the graveyard. This also lets you recycle itself and put back a card in your opponent's graveyard into their deck. Then we have the Wind Pegasus at Ignister monster. Now, this card is interesting. While it is in the graveyard, if one of your monsters is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect while this card is on the field or in the graveyard, you can banish this card, then target one card your opponent controls, and shuffle it into the deck. So, this is good in the sense that it's not a destruction effect, and your opponent's card also isn't going to the graveyard, so a lot of cards trigger their effects on destruction or when they get sent to the graveyard. This mitigates that by shuffling it back to the deck, so it's completely eliminating a resource from your opponent. Very, very good card. Then we play one copy of AA Zeus, just because it's kind of standard for the Zoo deck. It's a generic board wipe that isn't a once per turn and can chain to itself if need be. Then we play 2 copies of Tiger Mortar, 2 copies of Chalkonine, 1 copy of Trident, and 1 copy of Borbo to round off our Zoodiac Extra Deck package. This is extremely standard. Like I said in the last video, I think you will be seeing this lineup pretty much every single time that you're mixing anything with a Zoo deck. Then for the links, we play 1 Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos, 1 Nightmare Phoenix, and 1 Link Spider. Link Spider's utility here is to get these monsters off the field and into the graveyard, because these are technically considered normal monsters or vanilla monsters while they're on the field. The effects they have are given to them by its trap effect. So if you try to like Valor this card, nothing's gonna happen because it's the trap effect that's doing the popping for Conquistador and the banishing for Haquero. So be mindful of that. This is really good because this will get these cards in the graveyard, like I said, and then on the end phase, these will trigger banishing themselves, and you're setting your Sanguine, so you're just having constant access to your Golden Lord. Nightmare Phoenix is also really good. If you have this in your link zone already, this is basically just another way to get 2 monsters off the field, pop one of your opponent's back row, and then draw a card. So usually you can do this with resources that recur themselves, like Golden Lord. You can also pitch these cards, or your Sanguines, or any dead Cursed Eldlings, just to kind of give them a purpose if they're not doing so already while on the field. So if you're not getting any utility out of them by having them in your hand, at least they can be a decent discard. Then we play the Blackluster Soldier link. This is kind of like the pseudo Megaclops for this deck, because it can get really big, and if you use a level 7 or higher monster, this card cannot be targeted with card effects. Also, it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Also, when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can activate one of these effects. This card gains 1500 attack, which, if he is untargetable and can't be destroyed by card effects, a 4500 monster like that is extremely hard to out in this format. So keep that in mind. This is a really good card to go into. Then you have this card can make a second attack during the battle phase of your next turn. A little underwhelming because you're not getting kind of like the normal Blackluster Soldier effect where you can just go ahead and swing into a monster, destroy it, and then swing again. This is just getting the additional attack on the next turn. I think this is the one that you'll probably use the least, and I really haven't seen anybody use it myself, and I haven't used it personally. And then lastly, you can banish 1 card on the field. Now that effect is really, really good. Especially like if the game state's kind of stale, you're really trying to pick apart your opponent's resources without committing too much to the board. You don't really have to put any more effort into building up your field, and you can just kind of slowly pick it apart by banishing cards with BLS. So now here's the exciting part. I loved listening to Paulo talk about this because he seemed really into just sighting in tons of hand traps. Not taking out any, but just sighting in more hand traps and taking out a complete engine from his deck. So we have the best hand trap, PSY-Frame Driver, 3 copies of Skullmeister, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit at 3, Gamma at 3, because you have to pair it with your buddy for Driver, 3 DD Crow, 1 copy of Anti-Spell, and 1 copy of Order. Now these 2 I really didn't look too much into as to why he played them. I just know they're extremely strong against decks that are very spell reliant. So you'll find your niche circumstances where you want to play these. I honestly just kind of skimmed across people's explanations on the deck and didn't really see this touched upon too much. Just realize that Imperial Order as a one of is never bad. It's just generically good to side into if you're going first. You'll always find situations to play this card. So onto the PSY-Frames, he basically puts all of these cards in when he's playing against combo and takes out his Eldlich package. This is because against combo, Skullmeister is really good. Anything that activates in the graveyard, you discard this, and then you just negate the activation, or negate that effect. It's not negate the activation, it's negate the effect. So it's really good against Dinos, because you can hit Miscellaneousaurus, which this deck has a terrible matchup against Dino, as most decks do. Dino while I would consider it a meta deck, it definitely has that rogue deck feel where you're summoning out kind of like a boss monster and just doing the same kind of dino thing repeatedly where you're abusing Overraptor, the babies, and double evolution pill while having a big boss monster to kind of back all of that up. So Skullmeister's really good, just negates anything activated in the graveyard. Ogre is really good. It's technically a high impact hand trap, removes a resource from your opponent. It's good against Dragon Link. It's good against you could probably side this in against Prank Kids, and while I'm talking about that, he also mentioned siding this in against Prank Kids, because if they just normal summon a monster, link it off, and then try to trigger the graveyard effect, this negates that, and they have to have some sort of follow-up to get like another monster on the field, or they have to have more Prank Kids in hand, in tandem with like a fusion spell to kind of keep playing. So it's not terrible against Prank Kids. I know he said he sided it in when he played it, so there's a little bit of insight there. Going back to Ghost Ogre, it hits the field spells against Dragon Link. It is just good at removing resources if your opponent's not being careful about which effects they're activating. Generally a good hand trap, but mind which matchups you put it in against. You wouldn't necessarily want to put this in against like Dinos or, the Zoo deck, unless your opponent's bad and they're activating all of their effects going into game 2. So then we have Gamma. Gamma's generally really, really good. Paulo was talking about how he expected to play a lot of virtual world players, and this really does a number against them. Stopping their in-hand effects and sending them to the graveyard, it's just removing that like starter that they need. I don't have a lot of experience against the deck because over the last couple weeks I just haven't had time to play, and Virtual World is still kind of a new deck that's hitting their peak. I think at this point you see a lot of people in Dueling Book playing it, you see a lot of people in online tournaments playing it, so it has a high representation. Also, Gamma being able to hit cards like VFD or the True King of All Calamities is really good, because that's what Virtual World does. It just kind of throws a VFD on board and maybe like their level 9 synchro that functions as like a Macrocosmos. So this is very generically good against a lot of decks. It's good against Dino, it's good against Infernoble, it's good in the mirror match, it's just good against everything. Like any blanket negate that also destroys, it's a fantastic card. He played DD Crow. This is unique. I don't see a lot of people playing DD Crow, even though it has a lot of viability in the current meta. It's good in the mirror match because if your opponent is activating cards like Pot of Avarice, this can make that not resolve, because Avarice says you have to shuffle all of the targets into the graveyard, so if this banish is one of those, the Avarice kind of fizzles. This is good, especially if they're using Chalkanine to revive Dryden. You want to definitely remove Dryden as a resource from your opponent. This is good against Dragon Link because you're banishing their light and dark targets in grave, so they can't summon cards like White Dragon Wyverbuster or Black Dragon Collapse Serpent or cards like that. Not letting you recycle the Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. It just does a lot. It hits Miscellaneousaurus in the Dino matchup. It gets rid of their non-Dino target if they're going to be going for the double evolution pill play. It just has a lot of utility. I don't see a lot of people using it, but I definitely think it might have a good spot in this meta. And, like I said, just one copy of Imperial Order because it's at 1, and then one copy of Anti-Spell Fragrance. This might be because he just didn't have anything else he wanted to side in, and these are just kind of like powerful trap cards in general. I don't know what I would play in lieu of this, but I think the build itself is very interesting. I think his idea to side out his entire Eldlich package is also extremely interesting, especially in lieu of what is 13 additional hand traps when he already plays 3 Nibiru, 3 Ash, 3 Valor, and 3 Imperm. You just get an insane amount of hand traps. While a lot of the cards in the main deck are pretty much just one card starters in and of themselves, I still think it's extremely ballsy to play this way, but I definitely commend him on his top 8. I think he did a great job explaining himself in his video. Just want to congratulate him here. I don't know if he watches these videos or not, but he did fantastic, man. I'm super proud of you for representing this deck. I think playing 3 different engines that mesh well together like these, great idea, great meta call. Just proud to see you doing well. So thank you guys for watching this video. I really appreciate it. The support has been immense. We are getting ready to pass 60 subscribers, which is just insane considering I've only been making videos for 2 weeks. So I'm hoping to pass that 100 subscriber threshold here maybe within the next couple weeks. You guys have really been killing it and watching the videos. I mean, I have some videos that are coming up on like 800 views, which for someone with, 60 subscribers is fantastic. So we're reaching a lot of people. I think people are getting a lot out of these videos, and I want to keep producing content like this. And if you want to see more of this, please subscribe, please like the videos, please, you know, comment and have a discussion and a conversation with me down in the comments. I love talking to you guys. It's a real great way for me to kind of reach out to the community, see what I can do better, get your all's ideas, and I would love to keep seeing those. So, until next time, guys, thank you so much, and I will see you later.